Welcome to today's audiobook reading of The Billionaire's Quiet Promise, a heartfelt billionaire romance about success, loneliness, trust, and the kind of love that cannot be bought. Alexander Hayes has everything the world says should matter: wealth, power, influence, and a billion-dollar technology empire. But behind the public image is a man quietly wondering if anyone could ever love him for who he is, not for what he owns. Then, one Saturday at the Willow Street Community Center, he signs up as simply Alex and meets Emma Brooks, a kind, honest teacher whose life is built around service, community, and making small things better for the people around her. Emma has no idea who he really is, and for the first time in years, Alexander feels seen without his money standing between him and someone else's heart. But secrets have a way of coming into the light, and when the truth finally appears, Alexander must prove that love is not shown through status, grand gestures, or wealth, but through honesty, humility, and the quiet promise to keep showing up. So, settle in, relax, and enjoy a story of hidden identity, emotional healing, second chances, and a love that teaches one powerful man what true wealth really means. This is The Billionaire's Quiet Promise. Chapter 1. The man who signed up as Alex Emma Brooks had organized the Willow Street Community Center's Spring Renewal Project for 3 years running. And in 3 years, she had never once had a volunteer show up looking quite so out of place as the man who arrived on the first Saturday of April, dressed in clothes so obviously, deliberately casual, that they somehow announced money more loudly than a suit would have. "You must be Alex," she said, checking her clipboard, matching him to the single name on that morning's volunteer sign-up sheet. "You're with the mural team. We're repainting the community room. The kids have been asking for something more colorful than institutional beige for about 2 years now." "Alex," the man confirmed, extending a hand with an easy, practiced warmth that made Emma instinctively curious about him. "Happy to help however's useful. I should warn you, my artistic abilities peaked somewhere around 2nd grade." "That's all right," Emma said, handing him a paint roller and a bucket of what the Children's Design Committee had insisted on calling sky blue, but the good kind. "Most of what we need today is enthusiasm and a willingness to paint inside the lines the 8-year-olds drew for us. Actual talent is optional." He laughed, a real laugh, surprised out of him, and Emma noted, with the particular attentiveness she brought to reading people, that it seemed to catch him off guard, as though laughing easily wasn't something he did often enough to have grown fully comfortable with it. They were assigned to the same section of wall, an elaborate, ambitious mural design featuring a rainbow, several improbably large butterflies, and what appeared to be a dragon that the Children's Committee had insisted was historically accurate to their imagination, and spent the first hour working largely in companionable silence, the easy rhythm of shared physical labor requiring little conversation to feel comfortable. It was Alex who finally broke the silence, examining his own uneven brushwork with visible dismay. "I think I've made this butterfly look more like a moth having an existential crisis." Emma glanced over and laughed despite herself. "That's definitely a moth. A very troubled moth. In my defense, no one warned me butterflies had this many complicated angles," Alex said, stepping back to survey the damage with mock seriousness. I work in a field that involves a lot of very precise, very controllable variables. This is considerably more chaotic than I'm used to." "Welcome to community art," Emma said. "Chaos is basically the whole point. The kids specifically requested that the mural look like it was made by actual children, not professional artists, so honestly, your moth butterfly might be exactly what they're going for." Something in her easy acceptance of his mistake seemed to relax him further, his shoulders loosening in a way Emma noticed, without fully understanding why it struck her as significant. "What do you do?" she asked, genuinely curious, though careful not to push. "You mentioned precise, controllable variables. Sounds either very impressive or very boring, and I can't quite tell which from your face." "Bit of both, most days," Alex said, with a careful vagueness Emma might have found suspicious in someone less immediately likable. "I work in technology, mostly meetings, mostly staring at numbers that are either going up or going down and trying to figure out why." "That does sound like it could use more moth butterflies," Emma said solemnly. And Alex laughed again, freer this time, something in his chest loosening at the particular, uncomplicated pleasure of being teased by someone who had absolutely no idea what those numbers were actually worth, or what his last name meant to anyone who read a business section. They painted together for 3 more hours, conversation flowing easily between practical mural logistics and small, exploratory personal questions. Emma learned that Alex traveled frequently for work, that he'd grown up not far from here, actually, that he seemed to genuinely enjoy the simple, unglamorous work of scrubbing paint from his hands afterward, rather than treating it as an inconvenience to be delegated. Alex learned that Emma taught 3rd grade at the elementary school 2 blocks over, that she'd been organizing community projects since college, that she measured a good day not by achievement, but by whether she'd made someone's life slightly easier than it had been that morning. "Can I ask you something?" Alex said, near the end of the afternoon, both of them surveying their now completed section of mural, with the particular satisfaction of amateur artists who had, against expectation, produced something genuinely charming. "Why this? Why spend your Saturday painting butterflies with strangers instead of, I don't know, literally anything else?" Emma considered the question seriously, wiping paint from her hands with a rag. "I think success gets measured wrong, mostly. Everyone's chasing bigger houses, better titles, more zeros in a bank account, and I understand the appeal. I do. But I've never once, in my whole life, felt as genuinely happy as I do on a Saturday, when I've helped make some kids' community center a little more colorful than it was that morning. That's my version of a good return on investment, I guess. Just making things slightly better for people, wherever I can." Alex looked at her for a long moment, something shifting behind his eyes that Emma couldn't quite read, though she'd remember, later, that it had looked almost like recognition, like a man encountering, for the first time in longer than he wanted to admit, a genuinely uncomplicated kind of happiness he'd nearly forgotten existed. "I think that might be the smartest thing anyone said to me in about a year," he said quietly. "And I sit in meetings with some genuinely brilliant people. High praise from a man who painted an existential moth," Emma said, and he laughed again, and something small and unremarkable and entirely significant passed between them, the beginning, though neither fully recognized it yet, of something neither had been looking for. "Same time next week?" Alex asked, as the volunteer session wound down, the question carrying more weight than its casual delivery suggested. "I hear the dragon still needs finishing, and frankly, I don't trust anyone else with my artistic vision." "Your artistic vision produced a troubled moth," Emma reminded him, smiling. "All the more reason you shouldn't leave me unsupervised," Alex said, and Emma, surprising herself with how easily the answer came, found herself agreeing. Chapter 2. Grace Notices Everything. Grace Whitfield had served as Alexander Hayes's executive assistant for 6 years, long enough to recognize, within moments of his return to the office that Monday, that something about her employer had shifted. "You're humming," she observed, following him into his office with his usual coffee, black, and a stack of contracts requiring his signature. "In 6 years, Alexander, I have never once heard you hum." "I'm concerned. Should I schedule a physical?" "I'm allowed to be in a good mood, Grace," Alexander said, though the small, private smile playing at the corner of his mouth suggested there was considerably more to the story than a simple good mood. "You're allowed to be in a good mood approximately never, based on historical precedent," Grace said, setting down his coffee with the easy familiarity of someone who had long since stopped standing on ceremony with him. "What happened this weekend? You canceled the Morrison dinner, which you never do, and now you're humming show tunes over quarterly projections." "I need context, Alexander. This is my job." Alexander considered, for a moment, deflecting the question entirely, the way he deflected most personal inquiries, a skill honed over 11 years of carefully maintaining distance between his private self and the public persona the media had constructed around him. But Grace had earned, over 6 years of loyal, discreet service, more trust than nearly anyone else in his life, and something about the weekend's unexpected lightness made him want, for once, to actually share it. "I volunteered at a community center," he admitted, "painted a mural. Terribly, according to the 8-year-old design committee, though I'd argue my moth butterfly showed real conceptual ambition." "You painted a mural," Grace repeated, setting down her tablet entirely, giving him her full attention. Alexander Hayes, CEO of a company worth more than several small countries, spent his Saturday painting a community center wall. I need considerably more context than that. There's a teacher, Alexander said, and something in his voice, a softness Grace had genuinely never heard from him before. In 6 years of managing his schedule, his relationships, his carefully curated public image, made her sit up straighter with immediate, focused interest. Emma, she organizes the volunteer projects. I signed up as Alex, didn't mention any of this. He gestured vaguely around the office, at the view of the city stretching out below them, at the entire empire his name represented. You're using an alias, Grace said slowly, working through the implications. With a woman you're clearly already quite taken with, based on the humming. Alexander, I understand the impulse. I do, given everything with Vanessa and every other relationship that's fallen apart the moment someone learned what you're actually worth. But you understand this can't last indefinitely. The truth has a way of surfacing eventually, particularly for someone as recognizable as you. I know, Alexander said, and some of the morning's lightness faded, replaced by the familiar weight of a problem he'd been carefully avoiding since Saturday afternoon. I just wanted one thing, Grace, one person who liked me before she knew what I was worth. Is that so unreasonable? Grace considered him for a long moment, her sharp, protective affection for her employer, earned across 6 years of watching him work himself toward exhaustion, watching relationship after relationship collapse under the particular weight of his wealth and his family's complicated legacy, softening into something more sympathetic. It's not unreasonable, she said finally. But it is risky. Be careful, Alexander. Not just for the company's sake, for your own. If this Emma is as genuine as she sounds, she deserves honesty eventually. And you deserve someone who chooses you, the real you, once she knows everything. But the longer you wait to tell her, the harder that eventual conversation is going to become. Alexander knew she was right. He told himself, that Monday morning, that he'd find the right moment soon, after another volunteer session or two, once he was certain the connection was real, once he'd built enough trust between them, that the revelation of his identity wouldn't feel, to Emma, like a fundamental betrayal of everything she'd believed about who he was. He didn't yet understand how much harder that conversation would become, the longer he waited, or how much he stood to lose by continuing to delay it. He knew only that for the first time in longer than he could accurately remember, he was genuinely looking forward to a Saturday, and he wasn't quite ready to risk that fragile, uncomplicated happiness by rushing toward a truth that might end it entirely. Chapter 3. Building the Dragon. The following Saturday brought Alexander back to the Willow Street Community Center with an eagerness that surprised even him, arriving a full 20 minutes before the volunteer session officially began, ostensibly to help set up, but genuinely, if he was honest with himself, simply because he hadn't wanted to wait any longer than necessary to see Emma again. She was already there, arranging paint supplies with the brisk efficiency of someone thoroughly practiced at this particular Saturday ritual, and looked up at his early arrival with a smile that did something complicated and entirely welcome to his chest. You're early, she observed. Either you're very dedicated to finishing that dragon, or you actually enjoyed last week more than you let on. Can't it be both? Alexander asked, and Emma laughed, handing him a roll of painter's tape without further comment, though the pleased flush along her cheeks suggested she hadn't minded the admission. They spent the morning working on the mural's centerpiece, an elaborate dragon that had been, according to the Children's Committee's exacting specifications, required to look fierce but also, like, a little bit friendly, because dragons can be complicated, a design brief that produced considerable creative debate between Alexander and Emma over the appropriate balance of menace and approachability in dragon facial expressions. I'm telling you, the eyebrows need to be more dramatic, Emma insisted, gesturing with her paintbrush at Alexander's careful, restrained rendering. This dragon looks mildly disappointed, not fierce. I'm working within a very specific artistic vision, Alexander protested, though he was laughing as he said it. This dragon has emotional depth. He's processing complicated feelings about his role as guardian of this community room. He looks like he's had a difficult morning at the DMV, Emma said, And Alexander laughed so hard he nearly dropped his paintbrush. The easy, uncomplicated joy of the moment settling into his chest with a warmth he hadn't felt in longer than he wanted to examine too closely. It was during a break, sharing sandwiches Emma had brought from a nearby deli, that their conversation deepened into something more personal. The easy banter of dragon eyebrow negotiations giving way to quieter, more vulnerable territory. "Can I ask about your family?" Emma said, careful and unhurried, the kind of question that gave him room to deflect if he needed to. "You mentioned growing up nearby, but you get this look sometimes when family comes up, like there's a story there you're not sure you want to tell." Alexander considered deflecting, the way he'd deflected every similar question from every date, every reporter, every casual acquaintance who'd tried to peer past his carefully maintained public composure over the years. But something about Emma's directness, offered without judgment or agenda, made him want, unexpectedly, to actually answer honestly. "My father and I didn't get along," he said finally. "He thought I was too ambitious, too willing to sacrifice relationships for success. We didn't speak much, the last few years of his life. He died 3 years ago. I never really got the chance to prove him wrong, or figure out if he was right all along." He paused, surprised by how easily the admission had come, how little he'd had to force it out. "My mother and I talk twice a year, birthday and Christmas. It's polite. Not much more than that." "That sounds lonely," Emma said simply, without pity, just quiet, genuine acknowledgement. "It is," Alexander admitted, the honesty of the statement settling something unfamiliar and significant in his chest. "I don't think I've said that out loud before, not like that." "Success doesn't fix loneliness," Emma said. "I think people assume it does, especially people who haven't achieved much of it yet. But I've met plenty of successful people, through the school, through fundraising events, who seem to be carrying around the exact same ache as everyone else. Make a house, empty a feeling, sometimes. Money's useful, it's just not the same thing as connection." Alexander looked at her for a long moment, struck once again by the particular, uncomplicated wisdom she offered without any apparent awareness of how precisely it addressed his own life. "You have a way of saying exactly the thing I need to hear." "I have a lot of practice with third graders," Emma said, smiling. "You'd be amazed how much wisdom you absorb from 8-year-olds who haven't yet learned to overcomplicate things." They finished the dragon that afternoon. Fierce eyebrows, appropriately friendly smile, a design that satisfied even the Children's Committee's exacting standards. And as the volunteer session wound down, Alexander found himself, for the second Saturday running, deeply reluctant to say goodbye. "There's a farmer's market near here," Emma said, as they packed up supplies, the question carrying the same careful, hopeful weight his own invitation had carried the week before. "Sunday mornings. I usually go most weeks. You could, if you wanted, you could join me. No pressure, just an option." "I'd like that," Alexander said, and meant it completely. Something in his chest settling into a warmth he was beginning to understand he'd been missing for considerably longer than he'd previously realized. Chapter 4: Farmers Markets and Family. The Sunday farmers market occupied 2 blocks of Emma's neighborhood, a bright, bustling gathering of local vendors, fresh produce, and the particular community warmth Alexander had begun to associate, over these past 2 weeks, with everything Emma represented. "You've genuinely never been to a farmer's market," Emma said, more statement than question, watching his expression as they moved through the first row of stalls, his obvious unfamiliarity with the whole ritual visible in the careful, slightly bewildered way he examined a table of heirloom tomatoes. "My schedule doesn't usually allow for Sunday mornings," Alexander said carefully, which was true, if incomplete. His Sunday mornings typically occupied by conference calls with international offices, or reviewing reports that couldn't wait until Monday. "I mostly eat whatever gets delivered to my apartment." "That sounds efficient and deeply sad," Emma said, steering him toward a stall selling fresh bread. "Here, this is Mrs. Chen's sourdough. It's objectively the best bread in 3 boroughs, and I will fight anyone who disagrees." They spent the morning moving slowly through the market, Emma introducing him to vendors she'd clearly known for years. A flower seller, who pressed a small bundle of daisies into her hands. "On the house, sweetheart, you always brighten up my Sundays," an elderly couple selling honey who asked, with obvious curiosity, whether Alex was the new fellow Emma's grandmother had apparently already heard about, a question that made Emma blush and Alexander unexpectedly, thoroughly delighted. "Your grandmother's heard about me?" he asked, unable to keep the pleased surprise from his voice. "My grandmother hears about everything," Emma said, still faintly pink. "She's got a network of informants throughout this entire neighborhood. I mentioned I'd met someone interesting at the community center, and apparently that information traveled approximately 4 blocks within 24 hours. I'd like to meet her," Alexander said, surprising himself with how much he meant it. "Your grandmother, if that's something you'd want." Emma studied him for a moment, something warm and considering in her expression. "She's having her Sunday dinner tonight, actually. Whole family comes, usually. It's chaotic and loud, and there's always too much food. You could come, if you wanted. Fair warning though, my grandmother asks a lot of questions, and she has approximately zero filter about asking them." Alexander felt a familiar flicker of hesitation, the old, protective instinct that had kept him carefully guarded from exactly this kind of intimate family exposure for years, aware that any deeper involvement with Emma's family made the eventual revelation of his identity considerably more complicated, considerably more painful should things go wrong. But the pull toward saying yes, toward accepting this glimpse into the warm, chaotic family life he'd genuinely never experienced, proved stronger than his caution. "I'd love to," he said, and meant it. Emma's family home, when they arrived that evening, overwhelmed him immediately with a warmth he hadn't fully anticipated. 3 generations crowded into a modest house, filled with the smell of roasting chicken, and the particular noise of a family entirely comfortable with each other. Emma's parents greeting him with genuine, uncomplicated welcome, her younger brother immediately attempting to recruit him into an ongoing debate about a football game playing on a television in the corner. Emma's grandmother, Rose, held court from an armchair at the center of the living room, sharp-eyed and clearly delighted by the arrival of someone new to interrogate. "So you're the one Emma's been smiling about," Rose said, without preamble, gesturing him into the seat beside her with imperious authority. "Alex, is it? What do you do, young man?" "Technology," Alexander said, the same careful vagueness he'd offered Emma weeks earlier, aware even as he said it of how thin the deflection was beginning to feel, surrounded by people whose openness deserved better than his careful evasions. "Technology," Rose repeated, studying him with the particular directness of a woman who had, Alexander suspected, seen through considerably more sophisticated deceptions than his own. "That's vague, dear. What kind of technology?" "He's being modest," Emma interjected, saving him from further evasion, though her easy defense of him carried an unintentional weight that settled uncomfortably in his chest. She was defending a version of him she didn't fully understand, and the guilt of that gap between her trust and his honesty grew heavier by the hour. Dinner unfolded with the same warm chaos, Emma's family drawing him easily into their rhythms, asking genuine questions about his interests, his childhood, his hopes, in a way that felt entirely unlike the careful, transactional conversations he was accustomed to at galas and board dinners. People here weren't calculating what he might be worth to them. They simply seemed to like him, and the novelty of that uncomplicated acceptance struck him with unexpected force. Walking Emma home afterward, the evening air cool and comfortable around them, Alexander found himself uncharacteristically quiet, weighing the growing tension between the happiness he'd found these past weeks and the widening gap of his unspoken deception. "You went quiet," Emma observed, glancing over at him with gentle concern. "Everything all right? My family can be a lot, I know, my grandmother especially." "Your family's wonderful," Alexander said honestly. That's actually part of what's making me quiet. I don't think I've ever felt as welcome anywhere as I felt in that house tonight. It's making me realize how much I've been missing all these years." "That sounds like a good thing," Emma said, though something in his tone had clearly caught her attention. "It is," Alexander said. "I just wish I deserved it a little more than I currently do." Emma studied him carefully, curiosity and gentle concern mingling in her expression, though she didn't push further, simply reaching for his hand as they continued walking, the gesture carrying a trust that made Alexander's guilt over his unspoken secret grow heavier with every step. Chapter 5. the corner booth. Their friendship deepened over the following weeks into something neither could reasonably deny had become more than friendship, though neither had yet named it directly. Tuesday evening dinners at a small neighborhood cafe with a corner booth that had, through repetition, become unofficially theirs. Weekend volunteer sessions that stretched longer than strictly necessary. Phone calls that began with practical logistics and drifted, easily and often, into hours of conversation. Café Rosalie's was run by a cheerful, sharp-eyed woman named Rosalie Martinez, who had, within their third visit, begun preparing their usual orders before they'd fully settled into the booth, and who watched their growing closeness with the fond, amused attention of someone who had witnessed considerably more restaurant romances than she let on. "You two are the worst-kept secret in this neighborhood," Rosalie informed them one Tuesday evening, setting down their coffee with a knowing smile. "Everyone's placing bets on when you'll finally admit you're dating, instead of just having dinner as friends, which, forgive me, nobody actually believes at this point." "We are just friends," Emma said, though her protest lacked its usual conviction, and Alexander noticed, with private satisfaction, the faint flush that accompanied her denial. "Sure you are, sweetheart," Rosalie said, unconvinced, retreating back toward the kitchen with a knowing chuckle. Alone again, Emma and Alexander exchanged a look heavy with unspoken acknowledgement, the easy banter of the moment giving way, briefly, to something more serious. "Is she wrong?" Alexander asked quietly, watching Emma's expression carefully. "About us just being friends?" Emma considered the question with obvious care, her fingers wrapped around her coffee cup. "I don't think she's wrong," she admitted finally. "I think I've been enjoying this too much to want to rush it, or complicate it. But I also think you're one of the most genuine people I've met in a long time, Alex, and I'd be lying if I said I hadn't started hoping this was building towards something more than dinner in a corner booth." "I've been hoping the same thing," Alexander said, relief and warmth mingling in his chest at her honesty. "I haven't wanted to push, because..." He paused, weighing how much to reveal, old instinct warring against the growing desire to simply be honest with her. "Because relationships haven't gone particularly well for me, historically. I've learned to be cautious." "What happened?" Emma asked gently, giving him room to share as much or as little as he wanted. "I've dated people who seemed genuinely interested in me, and turned out to be interested in other things," Alexander said carefully, the deflection thin, but the underlying truth genuine. "It's made me careful about trusting too quickly. I didn't want to rush this, with you, because it's felt different, and I didn't want to risk ruining that by moving too fast, or by not being sure you wanted the same thing I did." "I want the same thing," Emma said, reaching across the table to take his hand, the gesture simple and certain. "I've been careful too, if it helps to know that. I dated someone in college who made me feel like my whole life, teaching, volunteering, the way I choose to spend my time and my energy, was somehow less impressive than whatever he thought I should be doing instead. It took me a long time to trust that someone could actually value the life I've built, instead of seeing it as something to be outgrown or fixed." "I don't want you to change anything about your life," Alexander said, with a sincerity that surprised even him with its intensity. "I think the life you've built is the most genuinely admirable thing I've encountered in longer than I can remember. I don't want to fix it, Emma. I want to understand it. I want to be part of it, if you'll let me." Emma's expression softened into something warm and unguarded, and Alexander, watching her across their small corner booth, felt something settle in his chest that had been unmoored for longer than he'd realized. A certainty, however fragile and however complicated by the secret he still carried, that this was the realest thing he'd built in years. "Then let's stop pretending Rosalie doesn't already know exactly what's happening here," Emma said, smiling, and leaned across the table to kiss him, soft and unhurried, the corner booth's dim lighting catching the moment in a warmth Alexander suspected he'd remember for the rest of his life. When they pulled apart, Rosalie's delighted, "Finally," rang out from somewhere near the kitchen, and Emma laughed against his shoulder, the easy joy of the moment settling something in Alexander's chest that felt, for the first time in years, entirely, uncomplicatedly happy. He didn't let himself think, in that moment, about how much harder the eventual truth would be to tell, now that the stakes had grown this much higher. He allowed himself, Instead, simply to be happy. Storing away the growing weight of his secret for a reckoning he told himself he'd face soon. Though, soon continued, week after week, to feel like a promise he wasn't yet brave enough to keep. Chapter 6. Board Pressure. The corporate world Alexander inhabited during the week continued, largely oblivious to his transformed weekends, though the tension between his two lives had begun, by early May, to create friction he could no longer easily manage. The Hayes Technologies Board convened for its quarterly meeting on a Thursday that found Alexander distracted, his attention repeatedly drawn toward his phone and a text conversation with Emma about that evening's plans, a level of divided focus his board chairman, Richard Voss, noted with visible displeasure. "You seem distracted, Alexander," Voss observed, once the formal proceedings concluded, the two of them remaining in the boardroom as other members filed out. "The Meridian acquisition needs your full attention this quarter. We can't afford any missteps, given how aggressively our competitors are circling that same opportunity." "I'm handling it," Alexander said, though with less of his usual sharp focus than Voss was accustomed to. "Is there something going on I should know about?" Voss pressed, his tone carrying the particular concern of a board chairman whose primary loyalty lay with shareholder value rather than his CEO's personal happiness. "There's been talk, Alexander. You've been seen around a neighborhood 2 boroughs from your usual circles, community centers, farmers markets. It's an unusual pattern for you, and unusual patterns tend to attract press attention eventually." Alexander felt a cold flicker of alarm at the observation, the careful privacy he'd maintained around his relationship with Emma suddenly feeling considerably more fragile than he'd allowed himself to acknowledge. "My personal time is my own business, Richard." "Normally, I'd agree," Voss said. "But you're the public face of a company worth billions, Alexander, and your personal life has a way of becoming shareholder business the moment it becomes press business. I'd simply encourage some caution. Whatever's going on, the board would prefer to hear about significant personal developments from you directly, rather than from a tabloid headline." The warning settled uneasily in Alexander's chest for the remainder of the day, old instinct urging him toward the careful compartmentalization that had protected him for years, while a newer, stronger impulse, one shaped entirely by 2 months of Saturday mornings and Tuesday dinners, and the growing conviction that Emma represented something worth genuine risk, pushed back against that same protective instinct with increasing insistence. He found himself, that evening, arriving at their usual corner booth, with the board's warning still weighing on him, distracted enough that Emma noticed immediately. "You're somewhere else tonight," she observed, studying his expression with gentle concern. "Rough day at the office? Something like that?" Alexander said, the deflection feeling, for the first time, genuinely uncomfortable rather than simply careful. "Complicated. Work stuff. Nothing I can really talk through right now." Emma accepted the deflection with her usual grace, though Alexander caught, in her expression, the faint shadow of something he hadn't seen before. Not suspicion exactly, but the particular attentiveness of someone beginning to notice a pattern of careful evasions accumulating between them. "You know," she said carefully, "you've mentioned work stuff quite a few times now, without ever really telling me what your work actually involves. I've never even asked which company. Come to think of it, I guess I've just been enjoying getting to know you without worrying too much about the details." "It's a technology company," Alexander said, the same careful vagueness he'd been offering for 2 months now, though it felt, in this moment, thinner and more dishonest than it ever had before. "I'd rather talk about you, honestly. My work is genuinely the least interesting part of my life these days." Emma studied him for a moment longer, curiosity and something more complicated moving behind her expression, before apparently deciding to let the deflection stand, at least for tonight. "All right," she said. "But someday, Alex, I'd like to actually understand the parts of your life you keep so carefully vague, not because I need details for their own sake, just because I'm falling for you. And falling for someone means wanting to know all of them, not just the parts that are easy to share." Her words landed with the full weight of everything Alexander had been avoiding, guilt and growing love tangling together in his chest with an intensity that nearly prompted him, right there in their familiar corner booth, to simply tell her everything. He didn't. He told himself, instead, that he needed a little more time, 1 more week, perhaps 2, to find the right moment, the right words, the right way to bridge the growing gap between the man Emma had fallen for and the billionaire CEO whose identity he'd concealed since their very first conversation. He didn't yet understand how quickly that carefully guarded time was about to run out. Chapter B: A Gala Complication. The invitation arrived from an unexpected direction. Emma's school had been selected, through a grant application she'd spent months preparing, to receive funding from the Hayes Foundation's annual education initiative, and the celebratory gala announcing that year's grant recipients was scheduled for the following Saturday, an event Emma had been invited to attend as one of the program's featured educators. "I can't believe it," Emma told Alexander over the phone, her voice bright with genuine, uncomplicated excitement that made his stomach drop with immediate, cold dread. "The Hayes Foundation, Alex. Do you know how significant this grant is? We'll finally be able to update the school's entire library, maybe even start that after-school arts program I've been trying to fund for 3 years. I have to go to this gala Saturday. Would you?" She paused, suddenly uncertain. "Would you want to come with me? I know galas probably aren't really your scene, but I'd love to have you there." Alexander felt the careful architecture of his double life beginning, in that moment, to genuinely crumble. The Hayes Foundation Gala was, of course, his own foundation's signature annual event, an event he would be expected to host, to speak at, to attend not as Emma's mysterious boyfriend, but as Alexander Hayes, CEO and founder, in full view of press, board members, and several hundred guests who would recognize him instantly. "I'd love to come," he heard himself say, buying time he didn't actually have, some desperate, cowardly part of him, hoping he might find a way to manage the collision of his two worlds without the truth finally, unavoidably surfacing. He spent the following days in increasingly frantic consultation with Grace, exploring every possible option for managing the impossible situation he'd created. "You have to tell her before Saturday," Grace said, with the blunt honesty of someone who had watched this exact collision approaching for weeks. "Alexander, you cannot let her walk into that gala and discover your identity through a stage introduction in front of 300 people and a room full of press. That's not a revelation, that's a public humiliation, and she doesn't deserve that, regardless of how this ultimately resolves between you." "I know," Alexander said, the weight of 2 months' accumulated deception settling on him with crushing, undeniable force. "I know, Grace, I just don't know how to say it. How do I tell someone I've genuinely fallen in love with that I've been lying to her since the day we met?" Carefully, Grace said, more gently now. "Honestly, and soon, because you're running out of time to do this the right way, if there even still is a right way at this point." Alexander knew she was right. He spent Thursday and Friday composing and discarding a dozen different approaches to the conversation, each attempt feeling simultaneously inadequate and terrifying. The stakes of Emma's reaction growing heavier with every hour he delayed. Hay arrived at Emma's apartment Friday evening, finally resolved to tell her everything, before the gala forced the revelation into a considerably more public and painful setting, only to find her already dressed for an impromptu celebration with her family, grant acceptance letter in hand, radiant with an uncomplicated happiness that made his carefully rehearsed confession catch painfully in his throat. "I have to tell you something," he began, as she pulled him into the apartment, still glowing with excitement about the grant. "Can it wait just one evening?" Emma asked, misreading his serious expression as simple exhaustion from work. "My family's coming over to celebrate in 20 minutes, and I really want tonight to just be about the good news, if that's okay. We can talk tomorrow, before the gala. I promise I'm not avoiding whatever's on your mind. I just want one uncomplicated evening first." Alexander looked at her, radiant, trusting, utterly unaware of the reckoning bearing down on both of them, and found himself, in a moment of cowardice he would regret bitterly in the days that followed, agreeing to wait. "Tomorrow," he said. "We'll talk before the gala, I promise." He didn't yet know that circumstances would rob him entirely of that promised conversation, that the truth Emma deserved to hear from him directly would instead arrive through the considerably crueler mechanism of a stage introduction and a room full of cameras, before he ever found the courage to tell her himself. Chapter 8: The Truth on a Stage. The Hayes Foundation Gala unfolded in the grand ballroom of the city's most prestigious hotel, chandeliers catching the light of several hundred elegantly dressed guests, a string quartet providing the kind of understated elegance that had characterized every one of Alexander's public events for the past decade. Emma arrived in a simple, elegant dress she'd borrowed from her sister, nervous energy visible beneath her genuine excitement, scanning the unfamiliar grandeur of the ballroom with the particular wonder of someone entirely outside her usual world. Alexander had arrived separately, delayed by a last-minute board meeting that had eaten into the narrow window he'd hoped to use for the honest conversation he'd promised her. Arriving at the gala with the truth still unspoken between them, a decision he would spend considerable time afterward recognizing as the single greatest mistake of his adult life. He found her near the entrance, radiant and visibly overwhelmed by the scale of the event, and felt the full weight of his impending confession settle over him with crushing finality. "This is incredible," Emma said, taking in the ballroom's opulence with wide-eyed wonder. "I had no idea the Hayes Foundation went this all out for their annual gala. Alex, I have to introduce you to some of the other educators. Apparently, the CEO himself is supposed to make an appearance tonight, though nobody seems totally sure when. I'm honestly a little starstruck. Alexander Hayes built his entire company from nothing. I've read so much about him. Emma, I need to tell you something," Alexander said, urgency finally overriding his careful timing, aware suddenly that he had perhaps minutes, not hours, before circumstances forced the revelation regardless of his readiness. "Before anything else happens tonight, there's something important. Ladies and gentlemen," the master of ceremonies announced from the stage, his voice carrying across the ballroom's sudden, expectant hush. "Please welcome the founder and CEO of Hayes Technologies, and the visionary behind tonight's celebration, Mr. Alexander Hayes." Emma's expression shifted in real time, confusion giving way to dawning, horrified recognition as Alexander, beside her, closed his eyes briefly against the crushing weight of timing that had finally, irrevocably run out. "Alex?" she said, quiet and stunned, watching him as the room's attention turned expectantly toward him, applause beginning to build around them. You're Alexander Hayes?" "Emma, I can explain," Alexander said, urgent and desperate, reaching for her hand as she took an involuntary step backward. "I was going to tell you tonight, before all this, I swear." "They're calling your name," Emma said, her voice carefully controlled in a way that frightened him considerably more than open anger would have, stepping further back as the crowd's attention began to shift visibly toward their exchange. "You should go. Your public is waiting." "Emma, please, just give me a chance to." "Not here," Emma said, something breaking audibly beneath her controlled composure. "Not like this, Alex. Or, should I even call you that anymore? I don't even know what to call you right now." She turned and walked quickly toward the ballroom's exit, leaving Alexander standing frozen between the stage's expectant applause and the retreating figure of the woman he'd genuinely fallen in love with, watching his carefully guarded secret finally, catastrophically collapse in the worst possible circumstances, in front of exactly the kind of public audience he'd always feared would cost him everything real he'd ever managed to build. He delivered his scheduled remarks that evening in a fog, the foundation's achievements and the year's grant recipients announced with careful professionalism that gave no outward sign of the devastation unfolding beneath his composed exterior. Cameras flashed, applause rose and fell. Somewhere in the crowd, journalists were already composing headlines about the reclusive billionaire's mysterious appearance at his own gala, entirely unaware of the far more significant story unfolding just outside their notice. A story about trust, broken in a single crushing moment, that Alexander understood, with sick certainty, might prove impossible to fully repair. He left the gala, the moment his obligations allowed, texting Emma with increasing desperation throughout the evening, receiving no response, the silence stretching longer and more ominous with every passing hour. By midnight, standing once again on a familiar penthouse balcony, city lights spread indifferent below him, Alexander understood that he had, through his own cowardice and carefully maintained deception, very possibly destroyed the first genuinely honest, uncomplicated happiness he'd built in his entire adult life. Chapter 9: Emma's Reckoning. Emma spent the days following the gala in a state of careful, deliberate distance from everything the revelation had upended. retreating into the familiar rhythms of her classroom and her community, with the particular determination of someone trying, and largely failing, to outrun the full weight of her own hurt. Her sister Claire, no relation to the sister from earlier stories, this Claire uniquely Emma's own, found her Sunday evening, surrounded by ungraded student essays she'd been staring at for an hour without actually reading, and settled onto the couch beside her, with the quiet, patient concern of someone who understood better than most when to simply sit with grief, rather than immediately try to fix it. "You don't have to talk about it if you're not ready," Claire said gently. "But I'm here, whenever you are." "He lied to me for 2 months," Emma said finally, the words emerging thick with hurt she'd been carefully holding back since Saturday night. Every conversation, every dinner, every Sunday at Mom and Dad's house, he was lying the entire time. "Claire, Alexander Hayes. I've read articles about that man. I know exactly what people say about him. Ruthless, calculating, only interested in whatever serves his empire. And I fell for him without even knowing his actual name." "Did the version of him you fell for feel like a lie?" Claire asked carefully. "I'm not defending the deception, Emma. That's genuinely not okay, regardless of his reasons. But I watched you with him at Sunday dinner. I watched the way he looked at you, the way he actually listened when you talked, in a way most of the guys you've dated never really bothered to. Did that feel fake to you, in the moment? Or does it just feel complicated now, because of what you've learned since?" Emma sat with the question for a long moment, old hurt and reluctant honesty warring in her chest. "It didn't feel fake," she admitted finally. "That's what makes this so much harder, Claire. If he'd felt fake the whole time, this would almost be easier. I could just be angry and move on. But everything about how he made me feel, genuinely seen, genuinely valued for exactly who I am, none of that felt like an act. I don't understand how someone can be that genuine and still lie about something so fundamental." "Fear does strange things to people," Claire said gently. "I'm not saying that excuses him, but maybe it explains him a little. You've told me yourself, plenty of times, how much money changes the way people treat each other, how it makes trust complicated in ways most of us never have to think about. Maybe he wasn't lying about who he is. Maybe he was just terrified of what would happen the moment you knew what he has." Emma considered her sister's words carefully, memory after memory from the past 2 months rising unbidden. Alexander's genuine, unguarded laughter over the moth butterfly disaster, his careful attention during every conversation about her family, her students, her hopes for the after-school program, the particular vulnerability with which he'd told her about his complicated relationship with his father. None of it, examined honestly, felt like the calculated deception of a man simply seeking a diversion from his usual, transactional world. "I don't know if I can trust him again," she said finally. "Even if I understand why he did it. Trust isn't just about understanding someone's reasons, Claire. It's about believing they won't do it again, and I don't know how to believe that right now." "You don't have to know that yet," Claire said. "You're allowed to be hurt and confused, and still not have all the answers figured out immediately. Just don't let anger make a permanent decision that maybe deserves a little more time and a little more honesty before you close the door on it completely." Emma thought about her sister's advice for the remainder of the evening, and for several days following, sitting with a hurt that refused to resolve itself neatly into either forgiveness or clean, permanent anger, aware that whatever decision she eventually made about Alexander deserved more consideration than the raw, wounded reaction of that first devastating night. She didn't respond to his texts that week, not out of continued anger exactly, but out of genuine uncertainty about what she wanted to say, once she finally found the words to say anything at all. Chapter 10: Alexander's Reckoning. While Emma navigated her own complicated grief, Alexander faced a reckoning of his own, not just with the woman he'd hurt through his deception, but with the broader pattern of guardedness and fear that had shaped nearly every significant relationship in his adult life. Gala's aftermath had produced exactly the media attention Voss had warned him about, though not in the direction anyone had anticipated. Several journalists, noting his abrupt departure and visible distress following his brief exchange with an unidentified woman, had begun speculating publicly about a personal crisis, generating exactly the kind of scrutiny Alexander had spent years carefully avoiding. He found himself, that following week, seeking out his mother for the first time in longer than either of them could probably calculate without checking a calendar, driven by a need he didn't fully understand, until he was already sitting across from her in the quiet, elegant sitting room of the house he'd grown up in. "You look terrible," his mother, Diane, observed, with the particular bluntness that had characterized their relationship for years, though something gentler moved beneath her words as she studied her son's clearly troubled expression. "What happened, Alexander?" "I met someone," Alexander said, the admission feeling strange and vulnerable in a house where he'd rarely shared anything genuinely personal. "A teacher, Emma. I didn't tell her who I was, not for months, and then the truth came out in about the worst possible way, in front of 300 people at the foundation gala. She won't answer my calls." Diane studied her son for a long moment, something complicated moving behind her carefully composed expression. "Your father did something similar, you know. Before we married, he didn't tell me about his family's money for nearly 6 months. Terrified I was only interested in him because of it. When I finally found out, I was furious, not because of the money itself, but because he hadn't trusted me enough to be honest from the beginning. It took considerable work to rebuild that trust." "I didn't know that," Alexander said, surprised by the revelation, by this glimpse into a family history he'd never fully understood. "There's a great deal you don't know," Diane said, not unkindly. "Your father and I had a complicated marriage, Alexander. Some of that complication came from money, and the particular fear it creates about whether you're loved for yourself or simply for what you provide. Your father never fully resolved that fear, even decades into our marriage. It cost him relationships he genuinely valued, including, I think, the one with you." Alexander sat with his mother's words, old grief about his father's disapproval tangling with new understanding about the fear that might have shaped it. "Is that why he was always so hard on me? About the company, about ambition?" "Partly, I think," Diane said. "I believe your father saw something of his own worst fears reflected in your ambition, the worry that you were building an empire specifically because you doubted anyone would love you without one. He never learned to separate his own insecurity from genuine concern for your well-being, and I think that failure cost both of you considerably in the years you had left together." The conversation settled something painful and clarifying in Alexander's chest, a recognition that his own careful guardedness with Emma, his instinct to hide his identity rather than risk genuine vulnerability, had been shaped by exactly the same fear that had damaged his relationship with his father, a cycle he suddenly, urgently wanted to break rather than perpetuate. "I don't want to lose her," Alexander said, the admission raw and honest in a way few conversations with his mother had ever been. "I don't want to become someone who protects himself so carefully that he ends up alone the way Dad did. I don't know how to fix what I've broken, but I know I have to try." "Then stop protecting yourself and start actually fighting for her," Diane said, with unexpected warmth. "Show her, Alexander, not just tell her. Anyone can apologize. It takes considerably more courage to actually demonstrate you've changed." Alexander left his mother's house that evening with a clarity he hadn't possessed since the gala's devastating collision, an understanding that winning back Emma's trust would require more than a well-worded apology. It would require him to fundamentally reconsider what he valued, and to prove, through sustained action rather than words alone, that the man she'd fallen for hadn't been a temporary performance, but the truest version of himself he'd built in years. Chapter 11. Showing up. Alexander's campaign to earn back Emma's trust began not with grand gestures, but with the same small, consistent acts of genuine presence that had characterized their relationship from the beginning. A deliberate choice, shaped directly by his mother's advice about demonstrating change through action rather than words. He returned to the Willow Street Community Center the following Saturday, uncertain whether Emma would even be present, driven by the recognition that showing up for the community she loved, regardless of whether she acknowledged him, represented a more honest demonstration of his feelings than any grand romantic gesture could offer. She was there, organizing that week's volunteer project with the same brisk efficiency he'd first encountered 2 months earlier, and her expression, upon seeing him, shifted through surprise, hurt, and careful, guarded neutrality in quick succession. "I'm not here to pressure you into anything," Alexander said, before she could speak, keeping careful distance between them, respecting the boundary her silence had established. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness just because I showed up. I'm here because I genuinely care about this community and about the work you do here, regardless of what happens between us personally. If you'd rather I leave, I will. But I wanted you to know I'm not disappearing, and I'm not expecting anything from you in return for showing up. Emma studied him for a long moment, old hurt and reluctant curiosity visible in her guarded expression. You can stay, she said finally, carefully, for the volunteer work. I'm not ready to talk about anything else yet. That's fair, Alexander said, and meant it, grateful simply for the small, uncertain permission she'd offered. He returned every Saturday that followed, working quietly alongside other volunteers, never pushing for conversation beyond what the work itself required, gradually demonstrating through sustained, patient presence that his commitment to this community, and, by extension, to her, extended considerably beyond the temporary charm offensive she might reasonably have suspected. He funded, anonymously through the foundation, a full renovation of the community center's aging playground equipment, careful to route the donation through channels that wouldn't immediately reveal his involvement, driven by genuine care for the children who used the space, rather than any desire for credit or recognition. He began volunteering, separately, at other community organizations throughout the neighborhood, a food pantry, a youth mentorship program, a Saturday literacy initiative, building relationships and demonstrating commitment entirely independent of his complicated relationship with Emma, a choice that gradually, through the neighborhood's efficient grapevine, began reaching her regardless. It was Rose, Emma's grandmother, who finally addressed the situation directly, cornering Emma during a Sunday dinner nearly a month after the gala's devastating revelation. That young man's been showing up all over this neighborhood, Rose observed, with characteristic bluntness. Not asking for anything. Not making a show of it. Just quietly doing good work, week after week, whether you're there to notice or not. I've lived a long time, Emma, and I've learned there's a considerable difference between a man performing changed behavior for an audience and a man actually becoming someone different because he genuinely wants to. From where I'm sitting, this looks a great deal like the second thing. He lied to me, Grandma, Emma said, the hurt still evident beneath her careful composure. For 2 months, about something fundamental. He did, Rose agreed, not dismissing the hurt. And you're allowed to still be working through that, however long it takes. I'm not telling you to forgive him on any particular timeline. I'm just telling you what I'm observing, because I think you deserve all the information before you make whatever decision you eventually make. That young man is doing the work, Emma. Whether or not it ever earns him anything from you, he seems determined to keep doing it anyway. That tells you something important about who he actually is, underneath whatever fear made him lie to you in the first place. Emma sat with her grandmother's observation long after Sunday dinner concluded, old hurt slowly, cautiously making room for a more complicated, more honest reckoning with everything she'd witnessed over the past month. A man who had lied to her once, catastrophically, but who had spent every week since demonstrating, through patient, unglamorous action, exactly the kind of character she'd once believed she'd fallen for. Chapter 12, The Conversation. It was Emma, finally, who initiated the conversation neither of them had been ready for, in the immediate aftermath of the gala, texting Alexander on a Thursday evening in early June, with a simple request to meet at their old corner booth at Rosalie's, 5 weeks after the revelation had shattered the careful world they'd built together. Alexander arrived early, nervous in a way his careful public composure rarely allowed him to be, and found Emma already seated when he arrived, her expression guarded but not entirely closed off, a small, cautious opening he chose to interpret as permission to hope. "Thank you for coming," Emma said, as he settled into the booth across from her, Rosalie discreetly retreating to give them privacy without her usual cheerful commentary. "Thank you for asking me to," Alexander said carefully. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure either," Emma admitted. "I've spent 5 weeks trying to figure out how I feel about all of it, and I still don't have a complete answer. But I've been watching you, Alex, or Alexander, I suppose I should actually call you now, showing up at the community center, at the food pantry, at the literacy program. My grandmother's been keeping me updated, whether I wanted the updates or not. I wasn't doing any of that to win you back, Alexander said honestly. I mean, I hoped it might, eventually, but mostly, I was doing it because you taught me something real, Emma, about what actually matters, and I didn't want to lose that lesson just because I'd lost you. I wanted to become someone who actually deserved the person you thought I was, that first Saturday, before you knew any of the complicated truth. Emma studied him for a long moment, old hurt visible alongside something softer, more considering. Why did you lie in the first place? I understand the broad strokes. You didn't want people interested in your money instead of you. But I want to understand it properly, Alex. I want to understand what was actually going through your mind that first Saturday, when you signed up as just Alex, instead of telling me who you actually were. Alexander took a careful breath, aware that this conversation would likely determine everything that came after it, and chose, finally, complete honesty over any remaining instinct toward careful deflection. I've spent 11 years building a company that made me one of the wealthiest people in the world, he said. And in 11 years, I've watched nearly every relationship I've had collapse under the weight of that wealth. People who claimed to love me, but who I could never fully trust, weren't actually just drawn to what I could provide them. My own father thought my ambition made me fundamentally untrustworthy. I built walls, Emma, over years, because every time I let someone close, I ended up questioning whether they actually wanted me, or just wanted access to my life. That first Saturday, signing up as just Alex, felt like an accident at first. But then you talked to me like I was just a person, not a walking bank account, and it felt like something I desperately needed and didn't want to risk losing by telling you the truth too quickly. So you kept lying, Emma said, not unkindly, simply working through the logic. Week after week. I did, Alexander admitted. And I know that doesn't excuse it. Every week I didn't tell you made the eventual truth harder to share, and I let my own fear determine that timeline, instead of respecting that you deserved honesty from the very beginning, regardless of how frightening that honesty felt to me. I was a coward, Emma. I let my fear of losing you become an excuse for treating you with less honesty than you deserved. I'm not asking you to pretend that's okay. I'm just trying to help you understand it, because I think you deserve the full truth now, even 5 weeks too late. Emma sat with his explanation for a long moment, something in her guarded expression softening incrementally. I understand the fear, she said finally. I even understand, in a strange way, why it happened. What I struggle with is that even after we grew close, even after I told you I was falling for you, you still didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. That's the part that hurts most, Alex. Not just the initial lie, the fact that you had chances, real chances, to be honest, and you kept choosing not to be, even as things between us grew more serious. You're right, Alexander said, accepting the criticism without defense. I should have told you the moment I realized how serious this was becoming. I let my own fear override what you deserved, and I'm genuinely sorry for that, in a way I don't think words can fully capture. All I can offer you now is the truth, completely, and the demonstrated commitment to never choosing fear over honesty again, if you're willing to give me any chance to prove that. Emma reached across the table, hesitant but deliberate, and took his hand. I'm not saying everything's fixed, she said carefully. I need more time, Alex. I need to see this consistency continue, not just for a few weeks while you're trying to win me back, but as who you actually are, going forward. But I don't want to close this door completely. I've watched you these past 5 weeks, and I believe the man showing up at that community center is genuinely who you want to become. I just need time to trust that fully, instead of just hoping it. Take whatever time you need, Alexander said, relief and renewed hope tangling together in his chest. I'm not going anywhere, Emma. I promise you that. Chapter 13. Rebuilding. Slowly. The weeks that followed unfolded with a deliberate, careful patience neither Alexander nor Emma had needed during the easy, uncomplicated beginning of their relationship. Trust, they were both discovering, required considerably more effort to rebuild than it had originally taken to establish. They resumed their Tuesday dinners at Rosalie's, though the conversations carried a new, more careful honesty, Alexander sharing details of his corporate life he'd previously kept carefully vague. The pressures of board meetings, the complicated dynamics with Richard Voss, the loneliness that had characterized so much of his adult success, all offered now without the protective deflection that had once defined his careful vagueness. Emma, in turn, began opening up about her own hesitations more directly, rather than simply retreating into guarded silence when uncertainty arose. "I looked you up," she admitted one evening, several weeks into their careful rebuilding. "After the gala, read every article I could find. Some of what people say about you is genuinely harsh, Alex, ruthless, calculating. I kept trying to reconcile that version of you with the man who painted a troubled moth butterfly and cried, actually cried, telling me about his father. I still don't fully know how to hold both versions in my head at once." "Neither do I, some days," Alexander admitted honestly. "I think the corporate version of me is real, in its way. I have made hard decisions, cut costs that affected people's livelihoods, prioritized growth over comfort more times than I'm proud of. But I don't think that version is the whole truth either. I think I built that ruthlessness partly as armor, the same way I built the whole guarded, secretive approach to relationships. I'm trying to figure out how to be successful without needing quite so much armor anymore. You've made me want that, Emma, more than anything else in years." Their reconciliation proceeded not through grand romantic gestures, but through the accumulated weight of small, consistent honesty. Alexander introducing her, gradually and with her explicit consent, to more of his actual world, beginning with a quiet dinner with Grace, whose genuine warmth toward Emma helped ease some of Emma's lingering wariness about the corporate world Alexander inhabited. "He hasn't hummed show tunes since the gala," Grace confided to Emma, over a dinner Alexander had stepped away from briefly. "6 years I've worked for that man, and I'd genuinely started to believe he'd never let himself be that happy again. I don't know exactly what happened between you two, and it's not my business to ask. But I've watched him fight harder to become a better version of himself these past 2 months than I've seen him fight for anything in 6 years, including the company. That has to count for something, even if it doesn't erase what happened." Emma found herself, gradually, believing that assessment more fully with each passing week, watching Alexander's continued, unglamorous commitment to the community center, to the food pantry, to a growing list of local organizations he'd quietly begun supporting. None of it performed for an audience, all of it sustained, regardless of whether she was present to witness it. The true test of their careful rebuilding arrived in mid-July, when a journalist, investigating the earlier gala incident, finally tracked down Emma's identity and published a story speculating about her relationship with Alexander, complete with unauthorized photographs taken outside the community center, and pointed questions about whether their romance represented genuine connection or calculated public relations. Emma, receiving unwanted media attention for the first time in her life, found herself frightened and overwhelmed by the sudden scrutiny, her carefully private, community-centered life suddenly exposed to public speculation she'd never sought or wanted. Alexander responded immediately, not with careful corporate damage control, but with direct, personal action, a public statement issued under his own name rather than through corporate channels, confirming the relationship, praising Emma's genuine character and community contributions, and firmly, unequivocally requesting the media respect her privacy going forward, a response that cost him some measure of the careful public mystique he'd cultivated for years, but that demonstrated, more powerfully than any private conversation could have, his genuine commitment to protecting her. "You didn't have to do that," Emma told him, genuinely moved by the statement's directness. "You could have just let it blow over quietly." "I could have," Alexander agreed, "but hiding you, even from the press, felt like exactly the same instinct that got us into this mess in the first place. I'm done hiding what actually matters to me, Emma, even when it's complicated, especially when it's complicated." Chapter 14, Family Reckoning. The growing public attention surrounding their relationship eventually reached Richard Voss and the Hayes Technologies board, prompting a tense meeting in early August that tested Alexander's newfound commitment to honesty and personal integrity against the considerable pressure of corporate expectation. This relationship is generating exactly the kind of unpredictable press attention this board has spent years trying to avoid, Voss said, during a private meeting following the quarterly board session, his tone carrying unmistakable disapproval. "I understand personal happiness matters, Alexander. But the board has legitimate concerns about how this affects shareholder confidence, particularly given the public statement you issued without prior board consultation." "I understand your concerns, Richard," Alexander said, with a calm, settled confidence that surprised even him, a steadiness born from months of learning to prioritize genuine values over careful image management. "But I'm not willing to hide a relationship I'm genuinely proud of, simply to maintain a carefully curated public mystique that was never particularly honest to begin with. If the board's confidence in my leadership depends entirely on my personal life remaining invisible, I think we have a more fundamental conversation to have about what this company actually values." "Are you threatening to resign over a relationship, Alexander?" Voss asked, visible surprise beneath his usual composed disapproval. "I'm telling you that I've spent 11 years building this company, partly because I believed success required sacrificing everything else," Alexander said. "I don't believe that anymore, Richard. I think Hayes Technologies can be successful, and I can be a good CEO, without requiring me to hide the parts of my life that actually matter most. If the board disagrees with that philosophy, we'll need to have a serious conversation about my continued role here. But I'm not choosing between this company and Emma. I'm done making that particular sacrifice." The meeting concluded without full resolution, though Alexander's unwavering position communicated with a settled confidence considerably different from his usual careful corporate diplomacy, established, at minimum, that his priorities had genuinely shifted in ways the board would need to reckon with going forward. That same week brought a different, more personal reckoning, as Alexander's mother, Diane, requested a meeting with Emma directly, a request that filled Emma with considerable anxiety, despite Alexander's reassurance that his mother's intentions were genuinely warm, rather than adversarial. "I wanted to meet the woman who's changed my son so dramatically," Diane said, over tea in the same elegant sitting room where Alexander had sought his mother's counsel weeks earlier. "He's different, Emma, lighter somehow, more willing to actually engage with his own family instead of maintaining careful, polite distance. I understand you two have had a complicated few months. I wanted you to know, from someone who's watched Alexander struggle with trust and connection his entire adult life, that whatever you've done to help him become this more open version of himself, it matters considerably more than you might realize." "I care about him," Emma said honestly. "Even when I was hurt by what happened, even when I wasn't sure I could trust him again, I never stopped caring. That's actually what made everything so complicated. It would have been easier, in some ways, if I hadn't cared as much as I did." "That's usually how the important things work," Diane said, with a small, understanding smile. "The relationships worth fighting for are rarely the easy ones. I learned that myself, with Alexander's father, though it took me considerably longer than it seems to be taking you two to fully understand it." The conversation deepened into a warmer, more personal exchange than Emma had anticipated. Diane sharing stories of Alexander's childhood, his early ambition, the complicated dynamic with his father that had shaped so much of his adult guardedness, offering Emma a fuller, more complete understanding of the man she'd fallen in love with. Not an excuse for his earlier deception, but a context that helped her hold both the hurt and the growing forgiveness with considerably more clarity than she'd managed on her own. "Thank you for telling me all of this," Emma said, as their conversation drew to a close. "I think I understand him better now, in ways that actually help." "Thank you for loving him enough to still be here, working through all of it," Diane said. "I don't think my son fully understood what he was missing until he met you, Emma. Whatever happens next between you two, I hope you know that you've already given him something considerably more valuable than he ever managed to build in a boardroom." Chapter 15, The Declaration. By September, their relationship had settled into something steadier and more honest than the careful, secret-laden beginning that had characterized their first months together. Trust rebuilding gradually through months of consistent, demonstrated commitment on both sides. It was during the Willow Street Community Center's annual Fall Festival, the same community center where their story had begun 6 months earlier, that Alexander finally offered the declaration he'd been building toward through months of patient, deliberate action. A festival filled the center's courtyard with the particular warmth of community celebration. Food stalls run by neighborhood families, children's games organized by volunteers. The mural Alexander and Emma had painted together, now faded slightly by months of sun, but still cheerfully visible on the community room's walls. Dragon and troubled moth butterfly both intact. Alexander found Emma near the mural, watching a group of children point excitedly at the dragon's dramatically fierce eyebrows, and felt the full weight of everything they'd built and rebuilt together settle into a certainty he'd been carrying for weeks, waiting for the right moment to finally voice it. "Can I tell you something?" he asked, coming to stand beside her. "Always," Emma said, and the easy trust in that single word struck him with the full measure of how far they'd traveled since the gala's devastating collision. "I used to believe success meant building something so impressive that people would have no choice but to value me," Alexander said, watching the children's continued delighted commentary about the mural's dragon. "I spent 11 years chasing that belief, and it left me lonelier than I'd ever been in my life, standing on a balcony the night my company went public, feeling absolutely nothing resembling the triumph I'd expected. I didn't understand, until I met you, that I'd been measuring success entirely wrong. You taught me that the version of success actually worth chasing has nothing to do with what you build, and everything to do with who you become, and who you choose to build it alongside." Emma turned to face him fully, something warm and attentive in her expression. "I lied to you," Alexander continued, "in a way that hurt you badly, and I understand if some part of you never fully forgets that, even as you've generously chosen to forgive it. But I want you to know, completely and without reservation, that everything else about these past months has been genuinely real. The man who painted that troubled moth butterfly, who fell in love with your family's chaotic Sunday dinners, who's spent every week since the gala trying to become someone who actually deserves your trust. That's not a performance, Emma. That's the truest version of myself I've built in my entire adult life, and I built it because you taught me how." He reached into his jacket pocket, retrieving a small, simple ring, not the elaborate, ostentatious jewelry his wealth could easily have afforded, but something modest and thoughtfully chosen, a design he'd commissioned specifically to reflect the values Emma had taught him to prioritize. "I'm not asking you to become someone different, or to trade your world for mine," Alexander said, kneeling in the courtyard beside the mural they'd painted together 6 months earlier, children's laughter and community warmth surrounding them. "I'm asking if you'll let me build a life alongside you, in whatever shape that actually takes, one where success gets measured the way you taught me it should be measured, through kindness and connection and genuine purpose, rather than through anything my bank account could ever provide. Emma Brooks, will you marry me?" Emma felt tears rise, joy and hard-won trust and months of careful, deliberate healing, all converging in a single overwhelming moment, the community center's courtyard around them falling into an expectant hush as nearby festival-goers began to notice the unfolding proposal. "Yes," Emma said, pulling him up before he'd even finished rising, laughing and crying in the same breath. "Yes, Alexander Hayes, I love you, the version who painted moth butterflies, and the version who runs a global company, and every genuinely complicated, hard-won version in between." The courtyard erupted in spontaneous applause from neighbors and volunteers who had, without fully realizing it, become witnesses to a love story built not on wealth or status, but on the patient, unglamorous work of rebuilding trust through consistent, demonstrated character, exactly the kind of success Emma had spent her whole life believing mattered most, now proven true in the most personal way imaginable. Chapter 16. What wealth actually means. Their engagement transformed, over the following months, not into the extravagant high society spectacle the tabloids had breathlessly speculated about, but into a partnership deliberately shaped by everything Emma had taught Alexander about genuine purpose and community-centered living. Alexander restructures significant portions of Hayes Technologies' charitable giving, working alongside Emma to establish new educational initiatives specifically designed around the community-level insight she brought from years of direct classroom experience, a collaboration that produced, within just a few months, considerably more effective programming than the Foundation's previous, more distant approach to philanthropy had ever achieved. Reach at Voss. initially skeptical of Alexander's shifting priorities, gradually came to recognize, through the company's continued strong performance, alongside its more genuinely values-driven public identity, that Alexander's transformation had strengthened rather than compromised Hayes Technologies' long-term position, eventually offering, with visible if reluctant respect, his personal congratulations on the upcoming wedding. "I underestimated how this would actually play out," Voss admitted during a board meeting in late autumn. "I worried, initially, that personal happiness would compromise your professional judgment, Alexander. Instead, I've watched you become a considerably more thoughtful, more genuinely effective leader since all of this began. I suspect your Emma deserves more credit for this company's improved culture than this board has been willing to acknowledge." Emma, for her part, continued teaching, refusing every suggestion from well-meaning acquaintances that her engagement to one of the world's wealthiest men meant she should abandon her classroom for a life of leisure, insisting instead that her work with her third graders remained exactly as meaningful to her as it had always been, regardless of what else her life now included. "I'm not trading my purpose for your fortune," she told Alexander, more than once, with the same gentle firmness that had first drawn him to her. "I'm adding your resources to my purpose, and hopefully making both of them considerably more effective in the process." Their wedding, held the following June in the same community center courtyard where Alexander had proposed, deliberately eschewed the elaborate, exclusive spectacle Alexander's previous social circle might have expected, instead gathering neighbors, students' families, community volunteers, and both their families together in a celebration that felt, by every account, considerably more like an extension of the Willow Street Community Center's warm, welcoming spirit than a Billionaires' high society wedding. Rose, presiding over the reception with characteristic authority, delivered a toast that captured, with her usual bluntness, the essential truth of everything that had brought them to this moment. "I've watched a great many romances unfold in this neighborhood over the years," Rose said, raising her glass toward the newly married couple. "Most of them start with obvious things: good looks, easy chemistry, the kind of spark that fades once real life sets in. This one started with a troubled moth butterfly and a man too scared to use his own name. It shouldn't have worked, by most reasonable measures. But I've never seen two people work harder to actually deserve each other once the hard parts arrived. That's the real secret, if you're wondering. Not the spark, the work you're willing to do once the spark gets tested." You have just listened to The Billionaire's Quiet Promise, a touching romance about wealth, loneliness, honesty, forgiveness, and the kind of love that chooses the person behind the public image. Alexander and Emma's story reminds us that success can fill a room, but it cannot fill an empty heart. Alexander had built an empire, but it was Emma's kindness, patience, and simple truth that taught him what it means to truly belong. Their journey shows that love cannot survive on secrets forever. It must be rebuilt with honesty, humility, consistency, and the courage to become better, not just for the person you love, but because love has finally shown you who you want to be. Thank you for spending this time with The Billionaire's Quiet Promise. If you enjoyed this audiobook, please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more emotional romance stories, billionaire romance audiobooks, and heartfelt fiction.